It was back in the late 80s. People were Looney Tunes. People were screaming at each other.
Oh my
The
goodness.
cook came out of the kitchen one day with a knife yelling.
This is at a meditation gathering.
This is at the meditation gathering, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Why have I come to this? So I walked out, Margaret the Atheist, and said, oh my gosh, I've seen it all wrong. There's something that's true. In my middle 20s, I lived in a log cabin with a trucker.
Oh, wow.
And cooked on a wood stove. It feels clear to me that his soul knew he was going, and there were things he needed to say to me, and that I needed to be there. Transmission is that love. It's that love in the purest sense, that there's no expectation in it. There's no anything in it except pure love.
So thank you so much, Margaret, for coming into the studio. I know it's your last day in Kanha and there's so much to do, but it means a lot that you took out the time just to sit here and chat. Thank you so much.
Really a pleasure.
So to begin with, Margaret, I mean, there's so much I know about you through your writing, and we met before also. But I also know that you're into physical therapy. You're a professor emeritus physical therapy. Just tell us about your work a little bit.
I worked for 40 years or 30 years on how to help people with Parkinson's disease function better within their condition. So I and some others were among the people who started looking at exercise as specific exercises as a way to help people. Before that, there was very little done except medication.
Of course, yeah. But this wasn't your obvious career choice because you have a PhD in microbiology, if I'm not mistaken. So how did this career choice come about? I mean, but you were training in microbiology.
I was in the microbiology lab extracting RNA from E. coli. And I would extract the RNA, and I would have 50 or 100 test tubes, micropipetting into each. It would take a week to get to the point where I would have to micropipette it. It was always Friday night. I would pick up my micropipette, and my nose would start itching. And I could tell that this was not I could tell that it was a sign. Huh. This is not for you. So I finished my PhD, but it was really not the right profession for me. And eventually I said, I've got to do something that involves people, not test tubes.
So it was just the fact that as a researcher, you were isolated in this lab and doing research, which you found not something that you wanted to continue with.
And I also understood that it was a time when if you didn't find the answer, there were 6 other people that would scoop you. And I thought, well, why should I do something that 6 other people can do? Why am I killing myself trying to be the first one to do this when there are plenty of others who can do it?
Yeah. So it is a very competitive field that way. I mean, there must be so many researchers who never get acknowledged because somebody beats them to it, I guess, right? And we never hear of their research or what work they've done.
Well, it was more that why should I spend my time trying to do something just to be the first to do it when there are plenty of people who can do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually what I did in physical therapy really helped to change the profession because nobody was doing it. It was at a time when they wanted people with PhDs to come into that profession.
So what exactly was it about having a PhD and being in physical therapy that was so, so different and could help?
Well, the first thing I did was develop frameworks for how we think about what we do in the profession. What is it that I'm doing with people with Parkinson's disease, and why should it help them? What's the theory behind it?
Mm-hmm.
And so we developed frameworks that have still had some influence
Wow.
on how people think about practice. Not everybody, but some people use it. Then we did actual experiments. And so I spent 30 years doing randomized controlled trials where you compare what you're doing to not doing it or to doing something else. And again, there was very little of that being done in physical therapy at the time. Now there are many physical therapists who are doing excellent work. And there were some at the time, but just very few.
Mm-hmm. So you were, in a way, a pioneer.
Exactly.
Wow.
And doing something where I felt it would have some meaning because there wasn't anyone else doing it.
Wow. So now this is one aspect of your life where it's deeply scientific. I mean, you've got a PhD in microbiology, you've been a professor, you're a professor emeritus in physical therapy. But there's another part of your life which many people would consider is not very scientific, and that's your spiritual life. You've been a heartfulness meditator, you're involved with we're at the Heartfulness Center now. How did that come about? How, from this person who's engaged in science, how did this parallel track of spirituality come in?
I think nature hits you over the head with whatever it takes to get you to wake up and do what you need to do in terms of your internal evolution. And so in my 30s, I developed fibromyalgia at a time when the condition wasn't understood, known, no one knew what it was. And I went to various physicians, rheumatologists, orthopedists, neurologists. Nobody could say anything. The sort of implication was that it was psychological. And I finally went to a psychologist who worked with me for a while and then said, you don't have the personality for this being depression or psychological. There's a real condition here. You may never know what it is, but it's real. And at that point, I realized I needed to do something because I was in a lot of pain, very fatigued, trying to work, trying to take care of myself. And I had read about Herbert Benson's work with relaxation. And I knew that the more stressed I was, the worse the fibromyalgia was. So I finally thought, well, I've got to do something. I need to try to meditate. And a friend of mine kept saying, you should meditate. And I was like, no, I've been the hippie. I've done that. I'm not going there again. But I finally realized that I needed to try it. And within 6 months, I understood that, yes, it helped me with the fibromyalgia, but it was really about something totally different.
Absolutely. Fibromyalgia still is not very well understood. I mean, of course, there's much more research been done about it, but even now, there's still a lot people are discovering about it. Can you explain for the audience who doesn't really know what fibromyalgia is? How does it manifest?
It manifests with diffuse pain in specific parts of the body. The arms, the legs, the torso, can be in the face. There are trigger points that are very painful. There's often extreme fatigue, disturbance of sleep. There can be problems with depression, other things. But it's not really known why it happens. It happens more in women than men. It's pretty widespread. And it's not really, even today, the treatments aren't great. For me, the treatments that were really helpful were not from modern medicine, but from traditional medicines.
Oh, wow.
And they really changed things.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a naturopath who got me on a very alkaline diet, and that helped a lot. And then some years later, I worked with a doctor of Oriental medicine who checked, after he worked with me for a while and wasn't getting anywhere, he discovered that I had almost no adrenal function. In fact, he said to me, I think the only reason you function is because of your meditation practice.
Wow.
But he eventually treated my gut microbiome. And when it took him a year, he destroyed everything in my gut, rebuilt it, and I was a new person. That was the first time I actually started feeling like, oh, I can do better.
Wow. And this started in your 30s. That's a time where we're at we're working the hardest. And to be hit with something like that must have been a real, changed your life completely, I suppose.
It did. Because I still had hopes of marrying, having a family, and it became clear that I could barely get out of bed I had to work. I lived alone. I was responsible for myself, and I had to find a way to do my work in order to support myself, in order to survive. And it became a very different life than I had anticipated. But it also became a much richer life.
Absolutely.
Much richer.
So you just mentioned in passing that you had, when your friend mentioned meditation, you said, no, the hippie phase is done and dusted. You had your hippie. What was your hippie phase like? When did that start? I mean,
My hippie phase was sort of beginning to come out in my PhD program. And then in my middle 20s, I lived in a log cabin with a trucker.
oh, wow.
And cooked on a wood stove, and very different life.
Very different life. And your childhood, what was your childhood like? Because a lot of the paths that we take later on in life can somehow be traced back to our childhood, Eventually, we do find threads there. And now you're into meditation and also into physical therapy. Your childhood, you grew up, your father was a mathematician. So the family had a scientific bent of mind, I'm guessing, and you traveled a lot. But was there sort of a spiritual bent of mind even then?
No, my family was very intellectual. And in fact, my grandmother was an obstetrician surgeon back in the 20s.
Wow.
So,
and if I'm not mistaken, she delivered you, right?
She delivered me.
Yes.
I was the only grandchild she delivered.
Wow.
But my family had been, for I think some generations, atheists or agnostics or something. But religion, spirituality were never part of my upbringing. Interestingly, a cousin of mine at the memorial for my mother talked about what a spiritual person she was.
Mm-hmm.
And it really set my ears open, because it wasn't a side of her that I recognized, but he did. So I don't know.
And it was a large family.
It was a large family. There were 8 children.
Wow. But you don't recognize any sort of spiritual bent as a child?
I don't. And within my siblings, I have one brother who has become, we grew up out of religion, but culturally Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one brother who is seriously involved in Judaism now. But in the rest of my family, it just isn't spoken about. It's not recognized. It's not understood.
So here you are in your 30s. You've got fibromyalgia, and your friend has suggested a form of meditation. You finally decide to take the plunge. How was your first experience? How did you experience heartfulness for the first time?
In my first experience, I remember the feeling of energy between the two of us, myself and the trainer, and a clear sense that this was something safe, that I could do this.
And within the first sitting, you could feel this?
That was in the first sitting.
Wow. Wow. And how did the practice then develop? How did
Well, you have to understand, I could barely sit up for any length of time. So I wasn't meditating. I probably didn't do any cleaning for 15 years. I did go to satsangs from the beginning. I would go to the Sunday satsang. Prayer was totally out the window because that was way too much religion stuff. And so I just would go to the trainer every week. And then about 6 months later, my friend said, Chariji is going to be in Atlanta. You must come. And I went. I thought, either you have to start doing this properly or you need to stop. Here's this trainer meeting with you every week. There's no charge. He's just doing it. And you're not doing anything. You better go find out what this is.
And what was that like then? You go across to Chariji and Chariji's visiting. What was that experience like? From what I've read, physically it was torturous.
It was torture. The night before I left, my friend called and said, it is so hot here in Atlanta. And I took all my warm clothes out of my suitcase and I put in the lightest clothes I could find. Nobody told me I would sit in the airport for 4 hours waiting for a ride to this place an hour from Atlanta. And I could barely sit, so that was torture. I got to the place and discovered that no one had told me to bring bedding or to bring anything. And all we had was mattresses. I had no sheets, no nothing, which I should have brought. And they had run out of sheets.
Wow.
So I had a mattress. The temperature dropped 50 degrees that night.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was freezing. I got up in the morning and I went to the breakfast, which was at picnic tables. And I sat down next to a man and a woman and a child and an older woman. And the man said to me, how are you doing? And I burst into tears. And it turned out it was Brian Jones, Chris Jones, their whole family.
Wow.
He took me to town. He helped me get a jacket. We came back. There was some bedding. That was the beginning. And
Wow.
it just went downhill from there.
Yeah, fill us in all the gory details.
It was back in the late 80s. People were Looney Tunes. People were screaming at each other.
Oh my
the
goodness.
cook came out of the kitchen one day with a knife yelling.
This is at a meditation gathering.
This is at the meditation gathering. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Why have I come to this?
Wow. Wow.
But about the 7th, 8th day, I was meditating. It was raining. It was big, huge Georgia rains. The tent was pitch black. I mean, it was very dark, not pitch black, but really dark. And I'm trying to meditate. I'm leaning against a pole because I can't sit. And there are no chairs. And they turned on the spotlights. And I thought, why are they turning on the spotlights? What's that about? And then I realized that it wasn't the spotlights. It was light.
Wow.
It was, and in that moment of light, I, who grew up an atheist or an agnostic or something, knew that I was really angry at my family who had deserted me when I got sick. And I realized that I had thought that I did what I did out of goodness, but really there was a lot of expectation that when I needed something, they would be there, and they weren't. And I understood that the only way you can ever love without expectation is if you have unconditional love within yourself, and that the only unconditional love is from God. So I walked out, Margaret the atheist, and said, oh my gosh, I've seen it all wrong. There's something that's true. It was so true.
Wow.
That I understand the born-again Christians who've been saved. Well, I'd been saved. And I went to my friend and I said, I get it, but I don't know what to do with it.
Wow. And this was, say, the 7th day of this 10-day gathering.
7th or 8th day.
Wow.
She said, I said, I have such anger at my mother, my father had died suddenly, maybe 7 or 8 years earlier, in his 50s. He just literally fell over dead, healthy man. And a large family. I was second of 8. And I had spent a lot of time helping, and my mother basically fell apart. She was a sort of dependent woman, couldn't function. But there was a resentment that the kids were coming to me and I was helping them. And of course, I was pretty...
You're second of 8, so you are almost like a foster mother to some of them.
Almost like a foster mother to some of them. Some of them lived with me at different periods of time. Now, I was a tough person, so I don't blame my mother for having a lot of conflict about me helping to take charge. But what I realized is I had tremendous anger. And I said to my friend, I don't know what I do. What do I do with this anger? Because now I understand that I need to let it go, but I don't know how. And she said, you need to talk to Chari. And I said, are you kidding? I don't know the man. I'm not going to talk to him.
An absolute stranger from India.
Yeah, no way. So she said, well, write him a letter. So I sat on my mattress for that whole day. I think it took me the whole day. And I wrote from the core of my being. And then I took the letter and I said, well, I wrote it, but I'm not taking it. You take it. She was, of course, very glad to be able to take a letter to him because she could go see him then. And when I went home a few days later, over the next month, different people in my family, for one reason or another, were in contact with me, my extended family, and I realized there was no anger. It was gone, pulled out from the root.
And was this anger something that had developed after your fibromyalgia diagnosis, or was it something that you had carried from earlier, that your family wasn't there for you like you were there for them, kind of?
I think both. I think I probably was very angry as a child because I think that the things I wanted to do, to become, were so different than what my parents wanted for their children. And I was I was born fighting. One of my aunts said that my first sentence was, I want to do it myself. Or, let me do it myself, or something like that.
Wow.
My mother was a very dependent person, and she didn't know what to do with a really willful, strong child. My older sister was very compliant. I was totally opposite. And I think it set up a dynamic from probably birth that was tough.
So you were always the strong one, the feisty one, and being your own person. And that necessarily doesn't go down well in a family.
Didn't go down well at all in my family.
Yeah. But it's amazing how those dynamics are, transcend geographies, transcend time. We have families even today which would have the same issues because these dynamics of not being, not getting along and not accepting another point of view, another way to live life is what destroys relationships. Now, after meditating for so many years, do you think there's something you would have done differently in childhood or approached something differently?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know how you can in childhood approach things differently because you don't know enough. You don't know yourself.
And you're being natural. You're living the only way you know how to.
You're just trying to figure it out. What I've come to understand is that my parents also were doing the best they could. They couldn't do differently than they did because they were living what they knew. And in fact, my mother and I, in her later years, developed a very nice relationship because we came to terms with each other. My father didn't live. My father and I had a good relationship, even though I battled with him all the time.
Hmm.
He's a very strong person, and he taught us to think for ourselves. But it turns out we weren't allowed to think differently than he did. and that made a problem
Yeah.
because I took him seriously.
You're allowed to think differently as long as you think like him.
Exactly. But I think if he had lived longer, we would have worked through that also. But he didn't live longer.
And this was a time when even America was going through turmoil. You were traveling around, you were in different places. You were in England for a bit as well. And you were in Louisiana at the time of segregation.
That's absolutely correct.
And your family, of course, opposed segregation.
Yes.
You know, that was the time when the whole South was in turmoil. What memories do you have of that?
I remember that I had been very popular. Then we moved away, and because we took my father took many leaves, we came back, and I was a pariah, and I couldn't understand it. Kids would, if I sat next to them, they would get up and move. If I threw a ball on the playground, ooh, shankpox, and they wouldn't catch it. And they were spitting at me out the bus windows.
My
And
goodness.
it got to the point where my parents really were afraid someone was going to get seriously hurt. And so when my father had an opportunity, they moved to Indiana, to Purdue University. It was only in my 30s or 40s I read a wonderful book called Warriors Don't Cry by one of the Little Rock 12, the children that
Mhm.
integrated Little Rock.
Yes.
She became a journalist,
Hmm.
and she wrote a book about that time. And reading it, I realized how profoundly difficult the situation in the South was, way beyond what I understood as a 13-year-old.
Hmm. So the your father and your mother were definitely progressive in their thought, but also, as you mentioned, as long as you thought like your father, it was fine. Now, in your 30s, you've started this heartfulness meditation. How does this journey go further? You've suddenly found that the anger is missing. Your family is calling you, and you've resented that they have kind of almost deserted you. You feel a sense of being deserted, and that anger is there. But now you feel that melting. And how does the spiritual journey go further? How do you engage more with heartfulness then?
Well, for whatever reason, my heart knew to keep doing this.
Hmm.
I didn't get it. I actually wrote to Chariji when I was in my maybe fourth year of meditating, and I said, I really like what this is doing for me. I have no clue what you have to do with it. Something like that. And a few months later, I was in Molina, Georgia, again at the ashram when he was there, and he permitted me to work as a preceptor.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, here I wrote a letter to him saying, I don't know what you are. And he said, sure, would you be a preceptor? So I struggled for many years as to what this was, but I kept doing it because I loved the changes. And over the years, my family became much more cohesive. I have good relationships with all my siblings, and a much better relationship with myself and with the people I worked with. And gradually, a lot of the rough edges got chipped away and thrown out.
Wow. And how do you explain it to your colleagues who are, the professors? Do you have a scientific explanation for what's going on?
Oh, that's a 3-hour conversation. Clearly, I see the world very differently now. And the only explanation that I have is that I've learned to connect with my heart. I've gradually allowed the impressions that were blocking me from feeling things in a big way to gradually be removed, to dissipate, to be cleared away through the practice. And every time that happens, I see things more clearly. So I might give an example to them of the time when I was in France, probably 7 years after I started meditating, something like that. No, actually, it was 3 years after I started meditating, or 2 years. It was very early. And I was having a sitting with Don Sabrin right before I left Ogeron. And at the end of the sitting, I felt like there was a hole in me. And I tried to figure out, what's this hole? And I realized that fear was gone. And then I realized that all my life, my parents had been very afraid. If you ride your bicycle on the street, you'll get run over and killed. We used to take a train from Lafayette to Bloomington to take piano lessons from my uncle. And they were so worried that someone would accost us and hurt us. If we left the gravy on the counter, we would get ptomaine poison. I mean, they were afraid of everything. And when I looked at that hole, I realized, oh, it was so natural to carry that fear because it was in my household, but it wasn't part of me. And it wasn't me fundamentally. And that's an example of how, as things are removed, I could see the world so differently and I could function so differently. The mechanics of how that works is totally mysterious. But I understand that through the sittings with the preceptor, or even better with the guru, with the master, that very long-standing impressions can go. And I've watched so many of them go. And I've watched how I change as they go.
Absolutely. It is really magical. And it's interesting that you mentioned the fear that was there in the household, you know. That fear sometimes comes out of a place of love. It comes out of because they're afraid that something might happen. We want the best for our children. So, we would want to, and it's amazing that this fear could actually transfer itself to you and be such a big part of your life and they never wanted that. They just wanted you to be safe. And, but unbeknownst to them, this kind of what we say, what we do, how it can have an impact on somebody is really something we need to be really careful about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that maybe even today parents could take heed from, that sometimes you may be just saying it out of your instinct, but sometimes it's just maybe.
But if that's the culture in the family, then of course you become part of it. The other thing is that my mother was fundamentally a very depressed person. And it was or maybe it was really just after my father passed away, but for probably 15 years, she was very depressed. And it took me a long time to realize that I had mimicked her depression. The fear and the depression weren't fundamentally my fundamental personality, and yet I had put them on like a clothing.
My goodness. That is really something, because you can, and as a child, you don't even know what you're doing, but it's just getting into you in a sense.
Yeah.
Your father, even though he was a mathematician and of course very scientific and used to read Aristotle and Socrates, but in fact, the very end of his life, he insisted that you come visit him. You weren't going to that trip. It was almost like he intuited that his time was drawing to a close.
Yeah, I was living in Boston, and there was a 3-day weekend, and he would just come home. I said, I'm busy. No, come home. And he was so insistent that I did. Just me. It wasn't a family get together. It was just me and my siblings who lived there. And the day that the last day that I was going to be there, we had a pond. We used to take walks to the pond. And we had a long talk about a lot of things. And one of the things he said to me is, you must get along with your mother. That evening, he was helping my brother with his homework. I went to answer a phone call, and my brother screamed. And I came in, and he had simply died. He had just fallen over dead. He clearly, it feels clear to me that his soul knew he was going, and there were things he needed to say to me, and that I needed to be there.
And there was no previous illness or anything that he was...
No, he'd been healthy. He'd been milking cows and climbing fences and doing his mathematics. There was no indication this was coming.
It's really incredible. You know, a lot, I've been reading about something called soul families. I think you must be aware of that also, how groups of souls travel together through many lifetimes. And if you look at life through that lens, somebody like you doing a spiritual practice, do you think it sort of spills over, it benefits others as well in the family?
I feel strongly that it helped to heal the family, because there was a lot of problems after my father died, a lot of ill will in lots of different directions. You know, you take a strong patriarch, take him out of the picture. It takes a long time to heal from that. And I had the sense that my own practice had somehow helped in that process. I tell you a funny story. I had a sister who spent much of her life being very depressed. And in the last 10 years, she really started becoming much less, she changed completely. And I really felt, and we were close, and I felt like a lot of it was because of my practice. And then one day she told me that my sister-in-law had encouraged her to take antidepressants. So that really was humbling.
Yeah.
Now, who knows? It may have been both. But
That's interesting. Yeah, sometimes we think that it's, you know, we may think too much of our role in another person's life.
We don't know. That's why I told you this. But I think it's both. I think it had an impact, because one thing I know is that as I change in my relationship with people, that vibration that we bring subtly changes the relationship between us. But I was reading recently about the butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if a butterfly flaps its wings in the
South
Amazon,
America,
there can be a tornado in Texas. We're all interconnected, and I understand it so much more clearly now, that those interconnections, the vibration between us that we don't even know is there, has profound influences, just profound.
And do you think this influence extends beyond the barrier of time also, in a sense? Because do you feel it sometimes? Do you feel the presence of people who are no longer physically present?
I don't. But I also am aware that there are people who do feel it. I tend to be very...
No, I mean, your training is all in science. So
it's all in the head. It's taken me so long to even feel my heart or to know what it is.
Yeah, but that's interesting, no? Because we can go either way on either side, and either side, it's like if you go totally to one side and start imagining that everything is this way, that's also a little, you know, start imagining that everybody's present right now, this one is that, and you become like overly spiritual in a sense, just like overly scientific in the other way. It's if the pendulum swings both ways, it's not very, it's best to have a middle ground between the two. Do you think that?
And you know who has just a beautiful example of the middle ground is Daji.
Hmm.
Oh my God. He really
Absolutely.
epitomizes the middle ground.
Because he's very scientific in his approach.
He's lived in both worlds.
He's lived in both worlds intensely and lived intensely in both worlds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I learned so much just watching him.
So tell us more about how, as a trainer, you've been able to take the practice to other people. Has it been easy to, do you see more people ready for a meditation practice now than when you started training?
I do. When I work with people who are just beginning now, they're so different than the people that I worked with 30 years ago. And that also suggests to me that all the work so in the United States, there were probably 100 Abhyasis, 100 seekers around Chariji when he would come. And as I described, people screaming at each other, people yelling at each other. I mean, it was very different.
That gathering seems to deserve its own book with the cook coming
It
out
really
with
does deserve its own book, but I don't think I'll go there. But what I can see is the tremendous work that Chariji did. We were having four 1-hour sittings a day at that time.
Well,
He would come, we would have 1-hour sittings 4 times. The amount of work that he had to do to prepare the soil is phenomenal. And what I realized is that work wasn't just on the people who were there, but it was work on the whole country. And so I see people coming now in the United States where I live who are in such a different place than we were back then. It's really fascinates me the amount of transformation that's occurred.
absolutely. Absolutely. And you've seen Chariji and then, of course, since 2014, Daji. Given your scientific training, was it easy to accept a teacher like this, a guru?
No, it was when Chariji, when I was being prepared to be a preceptor, I still couldn't relate to Chariji. I was like, I had just written to him and said, don't know what you have to do with this. I like what's happening. The idea of a guru, the idea of a spiritual teacher, the idea that anyone could transmit anything to me was so outside of anything I understood as a scientist. So I didn't relate to him. And the day before I was going to be have the final sittings, we were in there was a little room where in the place where he was sleeping, and we were meeting with Bill Waycott, who was a very long-time trainer, who was going to explain to us what we were going to do. And Chariji came outside. And so everyone rushed out to be with him. And there were some steps, and he was sitting on the steps, and I was sitting a few steps below him. A very long-legged man. And this is in the days when I really couldn't sit. I mean, it was just really uncomfortable because my back was, my whole body was so painful. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden my leg kicks out, and I kicked him really hard.
Oh, dear.
And I was looking straight ahead. I must have been beet red. And I couldn't look at him. I couldn't say anything. Years later, I realized he must have made me do that to try to get me to interact with him.
And he didn't say anything either?
He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I'm looking straight ahead. So the idea of a spiritual teacher, I didn't know what to do with it. And he couldn't even make me do something with it because I was a pretty stubborn one. It took a long time to get it. But because I loved the changes, I kept doing it.
So now how do you explain it? What is a spiritual teacher? What does the master do?
Oh my God, he's my heart. I I don't have words to explain it. I don't have words to really understand how he can do what he can do. But I know that without him, I couldn't be. And I know that it's not just Jaji. I knew this very early on. Someone asked me about something about Chariji and Babaji, and I looked at him and I said, they're all the same. They're just different forms of the same thing. I've always known that. There's something so fundamentally, universally profound about what they are, not as human beings, but as part of nature. And they're able to offer us to become that by very simple practices and by very serious willingness to work on ourselves.
And how do you explain the transmission? What is that really? What?
So as a scientist, I've been trying to define it for a long time, and I've read a lot about what it is. It's a vibration of, to me, can I tell you a story?
Of course.
Because it relates and it'll bring it back. Probably 10, 12 years into my practice, I had gone to the office. There was a very bad snowstorm, and I lived a block or two away, so I walked to the office. And on the way to the office, I saw ground into the snow and salt and ice and run over by cars, my scarf. And the scarf was a scarf that my niece had brought me from a trip to Latin America, an alpaca scarf. And I bent down and I picked it up because I couldn't lose it. And when I picked it up, I saw the gloves on my hands. Now, the gloves were gloves that my mother had sent me some years before when I was going to be going to Denmark to be with Chariji in the winter. She didn't have any money, but she kept saying, I'm going to send you these gloves. And she didn't send them, and she didn't send them, and she didn't send them. And the day before I left, they came by FedEx. Now, she didn't have money to FedEx things. And I was really irritated that my mother had sent me gloves by FedEx. They were rabbit fur gloves. And I thought, how can I put rabbit skin on my hands? But she had sent them to me, and I felt like I should wear them. They were too tight.
Mm.
They were for thin, long fingers. They were too long, too tight. My fingers are pretty short and stubby. It's like they don't even fit me. But I kept wearing them because she had sent them to me. And when I saw the gloves, I felt the vibration of love in them. And I realized, excuse me.
No, take your time. Take your time.
I realized that love isn't what I thought it was. You know, I wanted her attention. She gave me presents. I wanted to talk to her. It was never what I wanted. And I had never understood the love behind it. And transmission is that love. It's that love in the purest sense, that there's no expectation in it. There's no anything in it except pure love.
That's a beautiful, beautiful definition. I don't think any scientific definition could better that. It was really, it's really something. And given your condition of fibromyalgia, how do you think your spiritual practice has helped, or has it helped in any way?
You know, it became very clear very early on that the more stressed I was, the more symptoms I had. The more I meditated, the better I was able to handle stress, both stress at work, stress in my family, stress when my mother would come visit. It took time. It took a long time. But I became more and more stress-free. And that was of major impact on managing, not flaring up, not becoming in more pain, more fatigue. That, combined with the different traditional approaches to medicine that I used, allowed me to function pretty normally. I still have to be really careful. If I don't get enough sleep, if I do too much, I do a lot of my work lying down still because I can't sit up for prolonged periods without becoming fatigued. But most people don't know I live with it.
And a lot of times when there is anybody experiences a disease like that, one of the reactions that we can have is, why me? Why did it happen to me? Did you go through that questioning? Why do I suffer from this?
I don't think so. I don't think I went through that. But what I think is that after about 15 years, I really went through, oh my God, thank you. Because if this hadn't happened, I wouldn't have found heartfulness. I wouldn't have found a spiritual path. I would have lived the life that I was destined to live, of science and just the whole, such a different life.
Absolutely.
Science, success, achieving, those would have been my goalposts.
Absolutely. And now, do you think, looking back on your own experience with fibromyalgia and then discovering spirituality, that there is always a brighter side to things. There is always a reason why something happens. And because you said that fibromyalgia is so related to stress, so related to your mental state, how much do you think the mental state has to do with our physical state? How much does it impact our physical state?
I think that what happens to us physically happens to us physically. And I don't know how much stress caused the fibromyalgia to happen, just like I don't know how much stress causes cancer to happen or heart attacks to happen. They're related. But what I do know absolutely is that when you're stressed, anything that's weak in your body is worse. Anything that is problematic is going to be exacerbated. And I know this both from a scientific perspective and from a personal perspective.
Well, so lastly, Margaret, given your background in research, if you today were given an unlimited funding for some sort of research, what area would you like to research?
Well, the area that I'm working on with a group of people is to understand how consciousness expands.
Wow.
It's a really hard topic, and we have been chipping away at it for 5 years. Daji asked groups of scientists to really work on this. I don't know, so that's of deep interest to me. I've also been spending a lot of time trying to look at ways to measure the impact of the heartfulness practices, the meditation, the cleaning, the transmission. There are so many studies with infinite funding. If we had infinite funding and people to really help, that we could be doing. And we're trying to build in the Kanha research community. The Krishnamurti Jnana has done a phenomenal job of trying to move us to a place where we can really do the studies with really good funding and support because there are huge questions to ask. To try to understand what is different in meditating with transmission, in meditating with cleaning, than just any other kind of meditation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how consciousness expands is such a vast topic. I mean, I'm just embarking on that research is daunting, you know. And it's a question that people have been trying to answer for ages now.
What we're trying to understand is what is different about the heart. How can we capture what is different about the heart in heartfulness than anything else that's been studied about the heart? Why is it that heartfulness allows the heart to open to more and more of its true potential in ways that are light years away from any other practice, from what I can see? It's tough, but I think it's we're chipping away.
Yes, absolutely. And we wish you all the best with that, and hope you continue to keep coming back to Kanha. You leave tomorrow, but keep coming back, and we hope to see you. You're also writing a book, and at what stage is that?
So I want to back up and say one thing before we get to that. The people that I'm working with on trying to understand the heart, Roz Permain has been working on this for decades.
I know,
and has just phenomenal insights. And I've been working with her.
She's amazing, yeah.
With Krishnamurti Jayana, with Hester O'Connor. We've had a working group together now for 5 years. And you know the Awareness Atlas in the Spiritual Anatomy book?
Yes.
We developed that.
Oh, wow.
We were asked if there was a measure that could be put into the book, and Hester said, here's what we've been working on.
Amazing.
And we're working on validating that measure even further. But we did that with Roz and Hester and myself and Krishnamurti and Annalise Vishtant. And I want to acknowledge that it's not me, it's a group of us.
Yes, absolutely.
So you asked me a question.
About the book. I was asking about
the book.
Yeah.
So many years ago, I started writing for myself about the 10 maxims, one at a time. I used to go to Spurs in the United States, the retreat center, and I would sit in the sanctuary there after the 3 days when I could read. And because for the first 3 days, you couldn't read or talk or anything, but then you could read. And I would sit with the book on the maxims, and I would read a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, until I couldn't understand it. And then I would meditate on it. And then I would think about, well, what does this mean for my life? How do I change my behavior? And so I was writing little essays for myself. And then eventually we turned them into blogs and podcasts. And now what I'm trying to do is to write my story from the early, and you've read the first 3 chapters, the early chapters, which you've now written. I'm doing this with, again, with a wonderful group of people, Marcia Thompson, Greg Karsh, and Robin Gisbert, who's a colleague of mine from Colorado, and has dabbled in heartfulness, but is not a deep heartfulness practitioner. But we meet every couple of weeks, and we talk about it. And I'm writing the stories of what it is to try to learn to live more heartfully.
Wow.
And it's full of all the horrible things I've done in my life and the messy things I've done, and how I can look back on them and see where change needs to happen.
Do you have a working title for the book yet?
You know, the working title is A Journey to Heartful Living, but I don't think that's the title.
That's not going to stay, yeah.
That's just for now.
Wonderful. We really look forward to that. And where can one find the blogs and the podcasts?
They're on a website called principlesforheartfulliving.com.
Principlesforheartfulliving.com.
Yeah.
Great. So if anybody wants to look them up, they can look them up there. Thank you so much, Margaret. It's been such a beautiful sharing. Thank you for coming into the studio on your last day.
I always love being around you, so I'll do anything just to be around you.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of KanaCast. Do subscribe to KanaCast on YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify. Until the next episode, from the entire KanaCast team, namaste and goodbye.